The Ancient Wisdom. By Annie Besant. Chapter 1. The Unity Underlying all religions. Right thought is necessary to right conduct, right understanding to right living, and the divine wisdom, whether called by its ancient Sanskrit name of Brahma-Vidya, or its modern Greek name of Theosophy, comes to the world as at once an adequate philosophy and an all-embracing religion and ethic. It was once said of the Christian scriptures by a devotee that they contained shallows in which a child could wade and depths in which a giant must swim. A similar statement might be made of Theosophy, for some of its teachings are so simple and so practical that any person of average intelligence can understand and follow them, while others are so lofty, so profound, that the ablest strains his intellect to contain them and sinks exhausted in the effort. In the present volume an attempt will be made to place Theosophy before the reader simply and clearly, in a way which shall convey its general principles and truths as forming a coherent conception of the universe, and shall give such detail as is necessary for the understanding of their relations to each other. An elementary textbook cannot pretend to give the fullness of knowledge that may be obtained from abstruser works, but it should leave the student with clear fundamental ideas on his subject, with much indeed to add by future study but with little to unlearn. Into the outline given by such a book the student should be able to paint the details of further research. It is admitted on all hands that a survey of the great religions of the world shows that they hold in common many religious, ethical, and philosophical ideas. But while the fact is universally granted, the explanation of the fact is a matter of dispute. Some allege that religions have grown up on the soil of human ignorance tilled by the imagination, and have been gradually elaborated from crude forms of animism and fetishism. Their likenesses are referred to universal natural phenomena imperfectly observed and fancifully explained, solar and star worship being the universal key for one school, phallic worship the equally universal key for another. Fear, desire, ignorance, and wonder led the savage to personify the powers of nature, and priests played upon his terrors and his hopes, his misty fancies, and his bewildered questionings. Myths became scriptures and symbols facts, and their basis was universal. The likeness of their products was inevitable. Thus speak the doctors of comparative mythology, and plain people are silenced but not convinced under the rain of proofs. They cannot deny the likenesses, but they dimly feel, are all man's dearest hopes and lofty imaginings nothing more than the outcome of savage fancies and of groping ignorance? Have the great leaders of the race, the martyrs and heroes of humanity, lived, wrought, suffered and died deluded, for the mere personifications of astronomical facts and for the draped obscenities of barbarians? The second explanation of the common property in the religions of the world asserts the existence of an original teaching in the custody of a brotherhood of great spiritual teachers, who, themselves the outcome of past cycles of evolution, acted as the instructors and guides of the child humanity of our planet, imparting to its races and nations in turn the fundamental truths of religion in the form most adapted to the idiosyncrasies of the recipients. According to this view, the founders of the great religions are members of the one brotherhood, and were aided in their mission by many other members, lower in degree than themselves, initiates and disciples of various grades, eminent in spiritual insight, in philosophical knowledge, or in purity of ethical wisdom. These guided the infant nations, gave them their polity, enacted their laws, ruled them as kings, taught them as philosophers, guided them as priests. All the nations of antiquity looked back to such mighty men, demigods, and heroes, and they left their traces in literature, in architecture, in legislation. That such men lived it seems difficult to deny in the face of universal tradition, of still existing scriptures, and of prehistoric remains for the most part now in ruins, to say nothing of other testimony which the ignorant would reject. The sacred books of the East are the best evidence for the greatness of their authors, for who in later days or in modern times can even approach the spiritual sublimity of their religious thought, the intellectual splendor of their philosophy, the breadth and purity of their ethic? And when we find that these books contain teachings about God, man, and the universe identical in substance and a much variety of outer appearance, it does not seem unreasonable to refer to them to a central primary body of doctrine. To that body we give the name Divine Wisdom, in its Greek form, Theosophy. As the origin and basis of all religions, it cannot be the antagonist of any. It is indeed their purifier, revealing the valuable inner meaning of much that has become mischievous in its external presentation by the perverseness of ignorance and the accretions of superstition, but it recognizes and defends itself in each, and seeks in each to unveil its hidden wisdom. No man in becoming a theosophist need cease to be a Christian, a Buddhist, a Hindu. He will but acquire a deeper insight into his own faith, a firmer hold on its spiritual truths, a broader understanding of its sacred teachings. As Theosophy of old gave birth to religions, so in modern times does it justify and defend them. It is the rock whence all of them were hewn, the hole of the pit whence all were dug. It justifies at the bar of intellectual criticism the deepest longings and emotions of the human heart. It verifies our hopes for man, it gives us back ennobled our faith in God. The truth of this statement becomes more and more apparent as we study the various world scriptures, and but a few selections from the wealth of material available will be sufficient to establish the fact, and to guide the student in his search for further verification. The main spiritual verities of religion may be summarized thus. 1. Eternal, infinite, incognizable real existence. From that the manifested God, unfolding from unity to duality to trinity. From the manifested Trinity many spiritual intelligences, guiding cosmic order. Man a reflection of the manifested God and therefore a Trinity fundamentally, his inner and real self being eternal, one with the self of the universe. His evolution by repeated incarnations, into which he is drawn by desire, and from which he is set free by knowledge and sacrifice, becoming divine in potency as he had ever been divine in latency. China, which is now a fossilized civilization, was peopled in old days by the Turanians, the fourth subdivision of the great fourth race, the race which inhabited the lost continent of Atlantis, and spread its offshoots over the world. The Mongolians, the last subdivision of that same race, later reinforced its population, so that in China we have traditions from ancient days, preceding the settlement of the fifth, or Aryan race in India. In the Qing, or Classic of Purity, we have a fragment of an ancient scripture of singular beauty, breathing out the spirit of restfulness and peace so characteristic of the original teaching. Mr. Legge says in the introductory note to his translation, The Sacred Books of the East, that the treatise is attributed to Koyuan, or Suan, a Taoist of the Wu dynasty, AD 222 to 227, who is fabled to have attained to the state of an immortal, and is generally so denominated. He is represented as a worker of miracles, as addicted to intemperance, and very eccentric in his ways. When shipwrecked on one occasion, he emerged from beneath the water with his clothes unwet, and walked freely on the surface. Finally he ascended to the sky in bright day. All these accounts may safely be put down as the figments of later time. Such stories are repeatedly told of initiates of various degrees, and are by no means necessarily figments, but we are more interested in Koyuan's own account of the book. When I obtained a true Tao, I recited this Qing book 10,000 times. It is what the spirits of heaven practice and had not been communicated to scholars of this lower world. I got it from the divine ruler of the Eastern Hua, he received it from the divine ruler of the Golden Gate, he received it from the Royal Mother of the West. Now the divine ruler of the Golden Gate was the title held by the initiate who ruled the Toltec Empire in Atlantis, and its use suggests that the classic of purity was brought thence to China when the Turanians separated off from the Toltecs. The idea is strengthened by the contents of the brief treatise, which deals with Tao, literally the way the name by which the one reality is indicated in the ancient Turanian and Mongolian religion. We read, "The great Tao has no bodily form, but it produced and nourishes heaven and earth. The great Tao has no passions, but it causes the sun and the moon to revolve as they do. The great Tao has no name, but it effects the growth and maintenance of all things. I.1. This is the manifested God as unity, but duality supervenes. Now the Tao shows itself in two forms, the pure and the turbid, and has two conditions of motion and rest. Heaven is pure and earth is turbid, heaven moves and the earth is at rest. The masculine is pure and the feminine is turbid, the masculine moves and the feminine is still. The radical, purity, descended, and their turbid issue flowed abroad, and thus all things were produced. I.2. This passage is particularly interesting from the allusion to the active and receptive sides of nature, the distinction between spirit, the generator, and matter, the nourisher, so familiar in later writings. In the Tao Ching the teaching as to the unmanifested and the manifested comes out very plainly. The Tao that can be trodden is not the enduring and unchanging Tao. The name that can be named is not the enduring and unchanging name. Having no name, it is the originator of heaven and earth. Having a name, it is the mother of all things. Under these two aspects it is really the same, but as development takes place it receives the different names. Together we call them the mystery. I.1,2,4. Students of the Kabbalah will be reminded of one of the divine names, the concealed mystery. Again, there was something undefined and complete, coming into existence before heaven and earth. How still it was and formless, standing alone and undergoing no change, reaching everywhere and in no danger of being exhausted. It may be regarded as the mother of all things. I do not know its name, and I give it the designation of the Tao. Making an effort to give it a name, I call it the Great. Great. It passes on, in constant flow. Passing on, it becomes remote. Having become remote, it returns. 25:1-3. Very interesting it is to see here the idea of the forthgoing and the returning of the one life, so familiar to us in the Hindu literature. Familiar seems the verse, all things under heaven sprang from it as existent, and named, that existence sprang from it as non-existent, and not named, XL, 2. That a universe might become, the unmanifest must give forth the one from whom duality and trinity proceed. The Tao produced one, one produced two, two produced three, three produced all things. All things leave behind them the obscurity, out of which they have come, and go forward to embrace the brightness, into which they have emerged, while they are harmonized by the breath of vacancy. Xli 1. Breath of space would be a happier translation. Since all is produced from it, it exists in all. All-pervading is the great Tao. It may be found on the left hand and on the right. It clothes all things as with a garment, and makes no assumption of being their lord. It may be named in the smallest things. All things return to their root and disappear, and do not know that it is it which presides over their doing so, it may be named in the greatest things. 34, 1, 2. Quangs, 4th century BC, in his presentation of the ancient teachings, refers to the spiritual intelligences coming from the Tao. It has its root and ground of existence in itself. Before there were heaven and earth, from of old, there it was securely existing. From it came the mysterious existence of spirits, from it the mysterious existence of God, BK. Vi. Pt. I. Sec. Vi. 7. A number of the names of these intelligences follow, but such beings are so well known to play a great part in the Chinese religion that we need not multiply quotations about them. Man is regarded as a trinity, Taoism, says Mr. Legg, recognizing in him the spirit, the mind, and the body. This division comes out clearly in the classic of purity, in the teaching that man must get rid of desire to reach union with the One. Now the spirit of man loves purity, but his mind disturbs it. The mind of man loves stillness, but his desires draw it away. If he could always send his desires away, his mind of itself would be still. Let his mind be made clean, and his spirit of itself becomes pure. The reason why men are not able to attain to this is because their minds have not been cleansed, and their desires have not been sent away. If one is able to send the desires away, when he then looks at his mind it is no longer his, when he looks out at his body it is no longer his, and when he looks further off at external things, they are things which he has nothing to do with. 3, 4. Then, after giving the stages of indrawing to the condition of perfect stillness, it is asked, in that condition of rest independently of place, how can any desire arise? And when no desire any longer arises there is a true stillness and rest. That true stillness becomes a constant quality, and responds to external things, without error. Yea, that true and constant quality holds possession of their nature. In such constant response and constant stillness there is constant purity and rest. He who has this absolute purity enters gradually into the inspiration of the true Tao. 5. The supplied words inspiration of rather cloud than elucidate the meaning, for entering into the Tao is congruous with the whole idea and with other scriptures. On putting away of desire is laid much stress in Taoism. A commentator on the Classic of Purity remarks that understanding the Tao depends on absolute purity, and the acquiring the absolute purity depends entirely on the putting away of desire, which is the urgent practical lesson of the treatise. The Tao Te Ching says, always without desire we must be found. If its deep mystery we would sound. But if desire always within us be, its outer fringe is all that we shall see. 3. Reincarnation does not seem to be so distinctly taught as might have been expected, although passages are found which imply that the main idea was taken for granted and that the entity was considered as ranging through animal as well as human births. Thus we have from Quangs the quaint and wise story of a dying man, to whom his friend said, "Great indeed is the Creator. What will he now make you to become? Where will he take you to? Will he make you the liver of a rat or the arm of an insect?" Zila replied, "Wherever a parent tells a son to go, east, west, south or north, he simply follows the command. Here now is a great founder, casting his metal. If the metal were to leap up, in the pot, and say, I must be made into a sword like their Moish, the great founder would be sure to regard it as uncanny. So again, when a form is being fashioned in the mold of the womb, if it were to say, I must become a man, I must become a man, the Creator would be sure to regard it as uncanny. When we once understand that heaven and earth are a great melting pot in the Creator, a great founder, Where can we to go to that shall not be right for us? We are born as from a quiet sleep and we die to a calm awaking. B.K. Vi. Pt. I. Sec. Vi. Turning to the fifth, the Aryan race, we have the same teachings embodied in the oldest and greatest Aryan religion, the Brahmanical. The eternal existence is proclaimed in the Khandogya as one only, without a second, and it is written, "It willed, I shall multiply for the sake of the universe." Vi. 2, 1, 3. The Supreme Logos, Brahman, is threefold: being, consciousness, bliss, and it is said, "From this arise life, mind and all the senses, ether, air, fire, water, earth the support of all." Mundakopanishad 2, 3. No grander descriptions of deity can be found anywhere than in the Hindu scriptures, but they are becoming so familiar that brief quotation will suffice. Let the following serve as specimens of their wealth of gems. Manifest, near, moving in the secret place, the great abode, herein rests all that moves, breathes, and shuts the eyes. Know that as to be worshipped, being and non-being, the best, beyond the knowledge of all creatures. Luminous, subtler than the subtle, in which the worlds and their denizens are infixed. That, this imperishable Brahman, that, also life and voice and the mind. In the golden highest sheath is spotless, partless Brahman, that the pure light of lights, known by the knowers of the self. That deathless Brahman is before, Brahman behind, Brahman to the right and to the left, below, above, pervading. This Brahman truly is the all. This is the best. Mundakopanishad 2, 2, 1, 2, 9, 11. Beyond the universe, Brahman, the supreme, the great, hidden in all beings according to their bodies, the one breath of the whole universe, the Lord, whom knowing, men, become immortal. I know that mighty spirit, the shining sun beyond darkness. I know him, the unfading, the ancient, the soul of all, omnipresent by his nature, whom the Brahman knowers call unborn, whom they call eternal. Shvetashvatara 3, 7, 8, 21. When there is no darkness, no day nor night, no being nor non-being, there is, Shiva even alone, that the indestructible, that is to be worshipped by Savriti. From that came forth the ancient wisdom. Not above nor below, nor in the midst, can he be comprehended. Nor is there any similitude for him whose name is infinite glory. Not with the sight is established his form, none may by the eye behold him. They who know him by the heart and by the mind, dwelling in the heart, become immortal. Ibid. 4, 18-20. That man in his inner self is one with the self of the universe. I am that, is an idea that so thoroughly pervades all Hindu thought that man is often referred to as the divine town of Brahman. Mundakopanishad, the town of 9 gates. Shvetashvatara 3, 14, God dwelling in the cavity of the heart. Ibid. In one manner is to be seen, the being, which cannot be proved, which is eternal, without spot, higher than the ether, unborn, the great eternal soul. This great unborn soul is the same which abides as the intelligent soul, in all living creatures, the same which abides as ether in the heart. The ether in the heart is a mystical phrase used to indicate the one, who is said to dwell therein. In him it sleeps. It is the subduer of all, the ruler of all, the sovereign lord of all. It does not become greater by good works nor less by evil work. It is the ruler of all, the sovereign lord of all beings, the preserver of all beings, the bridge, the upholder of the worlds, so that they fall not to ruin. Brihadaranyaka 4, 4, 20-22, trs. Doctrine. When God is regarded as the evolver of the universe, the threefold character comes out very clearly as Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma, or again as Vishnu sleeping under the waters, the lotus springing from him, and in the lotus Brahma. Man is likewise threefold, and in the Mandukya Upanishad the self is described as conditioned by the physical body, the subtle body, and the mental body, and then rising out of all into the one without duality. From the Trimurti, Trinity, come many gods, connected with the administration of the universe, as to whom it is said in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Adore him, ye gods, after whom the year by rolling days is completed, the light of lights, as the immortal life. 4:16. It is hardly necessary to mention the presence in Brahmanism of the teaching of reincarnation, since its whole philosophy of life turns on this pilgrimage of the soul through many births and deaths, and not a book could be taken up in which this truth is not taken for granted. By desires man is bound to this wheel of change, and therefore by knowledge, devotion, and the destruction of desires, man must set himself free. When the soul knows God, it is liberated. Shvetash, I, 8, the intellect purified by knowledge beholds him. Mund, 3, I, 8, knowledge joined to devotion finds the abode of Brahman. Mund, 3, 2, 4. Whoever knows Brahman, becomes Brahman. Mund, 3, 2, 9, when desires cease the mortal becomes immortal and obtains Brahman. Kathop, Vi, 14. Buddhism, as it exists in its northern form, is quite at one with the most ancient faiths, but in the southern form it seems to have let slip the idea of the logoic trinity as of the one existence from which they came forth. The Logos in his triple manifestation is, the first Logos, Amitabha, the boundless light, the second, Avalokiteshvara, or Padmapani, Chenresi, the third, Manjusri, the representative of creative wisdom, corresponding to Brahma. Itel's Sanskrit Chinese Dictionary, sub voce, Chinese Buddhism apparently does not contain the idea of a primordial existence, beyond the Logos, but Nepalese Buddhism postulates Adi-Buddha, from whom Amitabha arises. Padmapani is said by Itel to be the representative of compassionate providence and to correspond partly with Shiva, but as the aspect of the Buddhist trinity that sends forth incarnations he appears rather to represent the same idea as Vishnu, to whom he is allied by bearing the lotus, fire and water, or spirit and matter as the primary constituents of the universe. Reincarnation and karma are so much the fundamentals of Buddhism that it is hardly worthwhile to insist on them save to note the way of liberation, and to remark that as the Lord Buddha was a Hindu preaching to Hindus, Brahmanical doctrines are taken for granted constantly in his teaching, as matters of course. He was a purifier and a reformer, not an iconoclast, and struck at the accretions due to ignorance, not at fundamental truths belonging to the ancient wisdom. Those beings who walk in the way of the Lord that has been well taught, reach the other shore of the great sea of birth and death, that is difficult to cross. Udnavaga, 29. 37. Desire binds man, and must be gotten rid of. It is hard for one who is held by the fetters of desire to free himself of them, says the Blessed One. The steadfast, who care not for the happiness of desires, cast them off and do soon depart, to nirvana. Mankind has no lasting desires, they are impermanent in them who experience them. Free yourselves then from what cannot last, and abide not in the sojourn of death. Ibid. 6:8. He who has destroyed desires for worldly goods, sinfulness, the bonds of the eye of the flesh, who has torn up desire by the very root, he, I declare, is a Brahmana. Ibid. 33:68. And a Brahmana is a man having his last body, Udnavaga, 33:41, and is defined as one who, knowing his former abodes, existences, perceives heaven and hell, the Muni, who has found the way to put an end to birth. Ibid. 33:55. In the exoteric Hebrew scriptures, the idea of a trinity does not come out strongly, though duality is apparent, and the God spoken of is obviously the Logos, not the one unmanifest. I am the Lord and there is none else. I form the light and create darkness, I make peace and create evil. I am the Lord that doeth all these things. Is, Xlvi, 7, Philo, however, has the doctrine of the Logos very clearly, and it is found in the fourth Gospel. In the beginning was the Word, Logos, and the Word was with God and the Word was God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. St. John 1:1-3. In the Kabbalah the doctrine of the One, the Three, the Seven, and then the Many, is plainly taught. The Ancient of the Ancients, the Unknown of the Unknown, has a form, yet also has not any form. It has a form through which the universe is maintained. It also has not any form, as it cannot be comprehended. When it first took this form, Kether, the crown, the first Logos, it permitted to proceed from it 9 brilliant lights, wisdom and the voice, forming with Kether the triad, and then the 7 lower Sephiroth. It is the Ancient of the Ancients, the mystery of the mysteries, the unknown of the unknown. It has a form which appertains to it, since it appears, through it, to us, as the ancient man above all is the Ancient of the Ancients, and as that which there is the most unknown among the unknown. But under that form by which it makes itself known, it however still remains the unknown. Isaac Meyer's Kabbalah, from the Zohar, pages 274-275. Meyer points out that the form is not the Ancient of the Ancients, who is the Ein Sof. Again, 3 lights are in the Holy Upper which unite as one, and they are the basis of the Torah, and this opens the door to all. Come, see. The mystery of the Word. These are 3 degrees and each exists by itself, and yet all are one and are knotted in one, nor are they separated one from another. 3 come out from one exists in 3. It is the force between 2 nourishes one. One nourishes many sides, thus all is one. Ibid. 373, 375,376. Needless to say that the Hebrews held the doctrine of many gods, who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods, and of multitudes of subordinate ministrants, the sons of God, the angels of the Lord, the 10 angelic hosts. Exodus 15:2. Of the commencement of the universe the Zohar teaches. In the beginning was the will of the King, prior to any existence which came into being through emanation from this will. It sketched and engraved the forms of all things that were to be manifested from concealment into view, in the supreme and dazzling light of the quadrant, the sacred tetractys, Myers. Kabbalah, pages 194-95. Nothing can exist in which the deity is not immanent, and with regard to reincarnation it is taught that the soul is present in the divine idea coming to earth. If the soul remained quite pure during its trial it escaped rebirth, but this seems to have been only a theoretical possibility, and it is said, all souls are subject to revolution, metempsychosis, alinogilgula, but men do not know the ways of the Holy One, blessed be it. They are ignorant of the way they have been judged in all time, and before they came into this world and when they have quitted it. Ibid. p. 198. Traces of this belief occur both in the Hebrew and Christian exoteric scriptures, as in the belief that Elijah would return, and later that he had returned in John the Baptist. Turning to glance at Egypt, we find from hoariest antiquity its famous trinity, Ra, Osiris Isis as the dual second Logos, and Horus. The great hymn to Amun-Ra will be remembered. the gods bow before thy majesty by exalting the souls of that which produceth them. And say to thee, peace to all emanations from the unconscious father of the conscious fathers of the gods. Thou producer of beings, we adore the souls which emanate from thee. Thou begettest us, O thou unknown, and we greet thee in worshipping each God's soul which descendeth from thee and liveth in us. Quoted in Secret Doctrine 3, 485, 1893, ed. v. 463, AD ed. The conscious fathers of the gods are the logoi, the unconscious father is the one existence, unconscious not as being less but as being infinitely more than what we call consciousness, a limited thing. In the fragments of the Book of the Dead we can study the conceptions of the reincarnating of the human soul, of its pilgrimage towards and its ultimate union with the Logos. The famous papyrus of the scribe Anak, triumphant in peace, is full of touches that remind the reader of the scriptures of other faiths, his journey through the underworld, his expectation of re-entering his body, the form taken by reincarnation among the Egyptians, his identification with the Logos. Saith Osiris Anak, I am the Great One, Son of the Great One, I am fire, the Son of Fire, I have knit together my bones, I have made myself whole and sound, I have become young once more, I am Osiris the Lord of Eternity. Xli 1, 4. In Pierre's recension of the Book of the Dead we find the striking passage. I am the being of mysterious names who prepares for himself dwellings for millions of years. P. 22. Heart, that comest to me from my mother, my heart necessary to my existence on earth. Heart, that comest to me from my mother, heart that is necessary for me for my transformation. Pages 113 to 114. In Zoroastrianism we find the conception of the one existence, imaged as boundless space, whence arises the Logos, the Creator or Harmist, supreme in omniscience and goodness, and unrivaled in splendor. The region of light is the place of Harmist, the Bundahis, sacred books of the East, v. 3. 4, v. 2. To him in the Yasna, the chief liturgy of the Zarathustrians, homage is first paid. I announce and I will complete my Yasna worship to Ahura Mazda, the Creator, the radiant and glorious, the greatest and the best, the most beautiful, to our conceptions, the most firm, the wisest, and the one of all whose body is most perfect, who attains his ends the most infallibly, because of his righteous order, to him who disposes our minds aright, who sends his joy-creating grace afar, who made us and has fashioned us, and who has nourished and protected us, who is the most bounteous Spirit. Sacred Books of the East, 31, pages 195,196. The worshipper then pays homage to the Ameshus pens and other gods, but the supreme manifested God, the Logos, is not here presented as triune. As with the Hebrews, there was a tendency in the exoteric faith to lose sight of this fundamental truth. Fortunately we can trace the primitive teaching, though it disappeared in later times from the popular belief. Dr. Haig, in his essays on the Parsis, translated by Dr. Weston forming Volume 5 of Trubner's Oriental Series, states that Ahura Mazda, or Harmist, is the Supreme Being, and that from him were produced two primeval causes, which, though different, were united and produced the world of material things as well as that of the spirit. P. 303. These were called twins and are everywhere present, in Ahura Mazda as well as in man. One produces reality, the other non-reality, and it is these who in later Zoroastrianism became the opposing spirits of good and evil. In the earlier teachings they evidently formed the second Logos, duality being his characteristic mark. The good and bad are merely light and darkness, spirit and matter, the fundamental twins of the universe, the two from the one. Criticizing the later idea, Dr. Haig says, such is the original Zoroastrian notion of the two creative spirits, who form only two parts of the divine being. But in the course of time this doctrine of the great founder was changed and corrupted, in consequence of misunderstandings and false interpretations. Spentelmanush, the good spirit, was taken as the name of Ahura Mazda himself, and then of course Angra Mainush, the evil spirit, by becoming entirely separated from Ahura Mazda, was regarded as the constant adversary of Ahura Mazda. Thus the dualism of God and devil arose. p. 205. Dr. Haig's view seems to be supported by the Gatha Ahunavati, given with other Gathas by the archangels to Zoroaster or Zarathustra. In the beginning there was a pair of twins, two spirits, each of a peculiar activity. These are the good and the base, and these two spirits united created the first, the material things, one the reality, the other the non-reality, and to succor this life, to increase it, Amati came with wealth, the good and true mind. She, the everlasting one, created the material world. All perfect things are garnered up in the splendid residence of the good mind, the wise and the righteous, who are known as the best beings. Yaz, 30, 3,4,7,10. Dr. Haig's translation, pp. 149-151. Here the three logoi are seen: Ahura Mazda the first, the supreme life, in and from him the twins, the second logos, then Amati the mind, the creator of the universe, the third logos. Amati was a first wisdom and the goddess of wisdom. Later as the creator, she became identified with the earth, and was worshipped as the goddess of earth. Later Mithra appears, and in the exoteric faith clouds the primitive truth to some extent. Of him it is said, whom Ahura Mazda has established to maintain and look over all this moving world, who, never sleeping, wakefully guards the creation of Mazda. Mihyast, 27, 103, Sacred Books of the East, 18. He was a subordinate god, the light of heaven, as Varuna was the heaven itself, one of the great ruling intelligences. The highest of these ruling intelligences were the six Amisha spens, headed by the good thought of Ahura Mazda, the human, who have charge of the whole material creation. Sacred Books of the East, v. p. 10. Note: reincarnation does not seem to be taught in the books which, so far, have been translated, and the belief is not current among modern Parsis. But we do find the idea of the spirit in man as a spark that is to become a flame and to be reunited to the supreme fire, and this must imply development for which rebirth is a necessity. Nor will Zoroastrianism ever be understood until we recovered the Chaldean oracles and allied writings, for there is its real root. Traveling westward to Greece, we meet with the Orphic system, described with such abundant learning by G.R.S. Mead in his work Orpheus. The ineffable thrice unknown darkness was the name given to the one existence. According to the theology of Orpheus, all things originate from an immense principle, to which through the imbecility and poverty of human conception we give a name, though it is perfectly ineffable, and in the reverential language of the Egyptians in a thrice unknown darkness in contemplation of which all knowledge is refunded into ignorance. Thomas Taylor, quoted in Orpheus. From this the primordial triad, universal good, universal soul, universal mind, again the logoic trinity. Of this Mr. Mead writes, the first triad, which is manifestable to intellect, is but a reflection of, or substitute for the unmanifestable, and its hypostases are a. the good, which is superessential; b. soul, the world soul, which is a self-motive essence; c. intellect, or the mind, which is an impartible, immovable essence. Ibid. p. 94. After this, a series of ever-descending triads, showing the characteristics of the first in diminishing splendor until man is reached, who has in him potentially the sum and substance of the universe. The race of men and gods is one, Pindar, who was a Pythagorean, quoted by Clemens, Strom, v. 709, thus man was called the microcosm or little world, to distinguish him from the universe or great world, Ibid, p. 271. He has the nu, or real mind, the logos or rational part, the oligos or irrational part, the two latter again forming a triad, and thus presenting the more elaborate septenary division. The man was also regarded as having three vehicles, the physical and subtle bodies and the luciform body or orgaids, that is the causal body, or karmic vesture of the soul, in which its destiny, or rather all the seeds of past causation are stored. This is the thread soul, as it is sometimes called, the body that passes over from one incarnation to another, Ibid, p. 284. As to reincarnation, together with all the adherents of the mysteries in every land, the Orphics believed in reincarnation, Ibid, p. 292. To this Mr. Mead brings abundant testimony, and he shows that it was taught by Plato, Empedocles, Pythagoras, and others. Only by virtue could men escape from the life wheel. Taylor in his notes to the select works of Plotinus, quotes from Damascius as to the teachings of Plato on the one beyond the one, the unmanifest existence. Perhaps indeed, Plato leads us ineffably through the one as a medium to the ineffable beyond the one which is now the subject of discussion, and this by an oblation of the one in the same manner as he leads to the one by an oblation of other things. That which is beyond the one is to be honored in the most perfect silence. The one indeed wills to be by itself, but with no other, but the unknown beyond the one is perfectly ineffable, which we acknowledge we neither know, nor are ignorant of, but which has about itself superignorance. Hence by proximity to this the one itself is darkened, for being near to the immense principle, if it be lawful so to speak, it remains as it were in the adytum of the truly mystic silence. The first is above the one and all things, being more simple than either of these, pp. 341-343. The Pythagorean, Platonic, and Neoplatonic schools have so many points of contact with Hindu and Buddhist thought that their issue from the one fountain is obvious. Agab, in his work, Die Philosophy, 3, pp. 85-105, presents many of these points, and his statement may be summarized as follows. The most striking is the resemblance, or more correctly the identity, of the doctrine of the one and only in the Upanishads and the Eleatic school. Xenophane's teaching of the unity of God and the cosmos and of the changelessness of the one, and even more that of Parmenides, who held that reality is ascribable only to the one unborn, indestructible and omnipresent, while all that is manifold and subject to change is but an appearance, and further that being and thinking are the same. These doctrines are completely identical with the essential contents of the Upanishads and of the Vedantic philosophy which springs from them. But even earlier still the view of Thales, that all that exists has sprung from water, is curiously like the Vedic doctrine that the universe arose from the waters. Later on Anaximander assumed as the basis, of all things an eternal, infinite, and indefinite substance, from which all definite substances proceed and into which they return, an assumption identical with that which lies at the root of the Sankhya, viz., the Prakti from which the whole material side of the universe evolved. And his famous saying I Pantarai, expresses the characteristic view of the Sankhya that all things are ever changing under the ceaseless activity of the three gunas. Empedocles again taught theories of transmigration, and evolution practically the same as those of Sankhya's, while his theory that nothing can come into being which does not already exist is even more closely identical with the characteristically Sankhyan doctrine. Both Anaxagoras and Democritus also present several points of close agreement, especially the latter's view as to the nature and position of the gods, and the same applies, notably in some curious matters of detail, to Epicurus. But it is, however, in the teachings of Pythagoras that we find the closest and most frequent identities of teachings and argumentation, explained as due to Pythagoras himself having visited India and learned his philosophy there, as tradition asserts. In later centuries we find some peculiarly Sankhyan and Buddhist ideas playing a prominent part in Gnostic thought. The following quotation from Lasson, cited by Garbon p. 97, shows this very clearly. Buddhism in general distinguishes clearly between spirit and light, and does not regard the latter as immaterial, but a view of light is found among them which is closely related to that of the Gnostics. According to this, light is the manifestation of spirit in matter. The intelligence thus clothed in light comes into relation with matter, in which the light can be lessened and at last quite obscured, in which case the intelligence falls finally into complete unconsciousness. Of the highest intelligence it is maintained that it is neither light nor not light, neither darkness nor not darkness, since all those expressions denote relations of the intelligence to the light, which indeed in the beginning was free from these connections, but later on encloses the intelligence and mediates its connection with matter. It follows from this that the Buddhist view ascribes to the highest intelligence the power to produce light from itself, and that in this respect also there is an agreement between Buddhism and Gnosticism. Garb here points out that, as regards the features alluded to, the agreement between Gnosticism and Sankhya is very much closer than that with Buddhism. For while these views as to the relations between light and spirit pertain to the later phases of Buddhism, and are not at all fundamental to, or characteristic of it as such, the Sankhya teaches clearly and precisely that spirit is light. Later still the influence of the Sankhya thought is very plainly evident in the Neoplatonic writers, while the doctrine of the Logos or Word, though not of Sankhyan origin, shows even in its details that it has been derived from India, where the conception of Vak, the divine word, plays so prominent a part in the Brahmanical system. Coming to the Christian religion, contemporaneous with the Gnostic and Neoplatonic systems, we shall find no difficulty in tracing most of the same fundamental teachings with which we have now become so familiar. The threefold Logos appears as the Trinity, the first Logos, the fount of all life being the Father, the dual-natured second Logos the Son, God-Man, the third, the creative mind, the Holy Ghost, whose brooding over the waters of chaos brought forth the worlds. Then comes the seven spirits of God, Reverend 4, 5, and the hosts archangels and angels. Of the one existence from which all comes and into which all returns, but little is hinted, the nature that by searching cannot be found out, but the great doctors of the Church Catholic always posit the unfathomable deity, incomprehensible, infinite, and therefore necessarily but one and partless. Man is made in the image of God, General I, 26-27, and is consequently triple in his nature, spirit and soul and body, 1 Thess. v. 23, he is a habitation of God, if 22, the temple of God, I Cor. 3, 16, the temple of the Holy Ghost, I Cor. Vi. 19, phrases that exactly echo the Hindu teaching. The doctrine of reincarnation is rather taken for granted in the New Testament than distinctly taught. Thus Jesus, speaking of John the Baptist, declares that he is Elias which was for to come. Matt. 11:14, referring to the words of Malachi, I will send you Elijah the prophet, Mal, Iv. 5, and again, when asked as to Elijah coming before the Messiah, he answered that Elias is come already and they knew him not. Matt. 17:12. So again we find the disciples taking reincarnation for granted in asking whether blindness from birth was a punishment for a man's sin, and Jesus in answer not rejecting the possibility of antenatal sin, but only excluding it as causing the blindness in the special instance. John 9:1-13, the remarkable phrase applied to him that overcometh in Reverend 3:12, that he shall be a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out, has been taken as signifying escape from rebirth. From the writings of some of the Christian fathers a good case may be made for a current belief in reincarnation. Some argue that only the pre-existence of the soul is taught, but this view does not seem to me supported by the evidence. The unity of moral teaching is not less striking than the unity of the conceptions of the universe and of the experiences of those who rose out of the prison of the body into the freedom of the higher spheres. It is clear that this body of primeval teaching was in the hands of definite custodians, who had schools in which they taught, disciples who studied their doctrines. The identity of these schools and of their discipline stands out plainly when we study the moral teaching, the demands made on the pupils, and the mental and spiritual states to which they were raised. A caustic division is made in the Tao Te Ching of the types of scholars. Scholars of the highest class, when they hear about the Tao, earnestly carry it into practice. Scholars of the middle class, when they have heard about it, seem now to keep it and now to lose it. Scholars of the lowest class, when they have heard about it, laugh greatly at it. Sacred Books of the East, 39, Op. Cit. Xl. 1. In the same book we read, the sage puts his own person last, and yet it is found in the foremost place. He treats his person as if it were foreign to him, and yet that person is preserved. It is not because he has no personal and private ends that therefore such ends are realized. 7:2. He is free from self-display, and therefore he shines from self-assertion, and therefore he is distinguished from self-boasting, and therefore his merit is acknowledged, from self-complacency, and therefore he acquires superiority. It is because he is thus free from striving that therefore no one in the world is able to strive with him. 22:2. There is no guilt greater than to sanction ambition, no calamity greater than to be discontented with one's lot, no fault greater than the wish to be getting. Xl. 2. To those who are good, to me, I am good, and to those who are not good, to me, I am also good, and thus all get to be good. To those who are sincere, with me, I am sincere, and to those who are not sincere, with me, I am also sincere, and thus all get to be sincere. Xl. 1. He who has in himself abundantly the attributes of the Tao is like an infant. Poisonous insects will not sting him, fierce beasts will not seize him, birds of prey will not strike him. Lv. 1. I have three precious things which I prize and hold fast. The first is gentleness, the second is economy, the third is shrinking from taking precedence of others. Gentleness is sure to be victorious, even in battle, and firmly to maintain its ground. Heaven will save its possessor, by his very gentleness protecting him. Lux vi. 2,4. Among the Hindus there were selected scholars deemed worthy of special instruction to whom the Guru imparted the secret teachings, while the general rules of right living may be gathered from Manu's ordinances, the Upanishads, the Mahabharata and many other treatises. Let him say what is true. Let him say what is pleasing, let him utter no disagreeable truth, and let him utter no agreeable falsehood. That is the eternal law. Manu 4:138. giving no pain to any creature. Let him slowly accumulate spiritual merit. 4. 238. For that wise-born man, by whom not the smallest danger even is caused to created beings, there will be no danger from any quarter, after he is freed from his body. Vi. 40. Let him patiently bear hard words, let him not insult anybody, and let him not become anybody's enemy for the sake of this perishable body. Against an angry man let him not in return show anger, let him bless when he is cursed. Vi. 47-48. Freed from passion, fear and anger, thinking on me, taking refuge in me, purified in the fire of wisdom, many have entered my being. Bhagavad Gita 4:10. Supreme joys for the yogi whose manners is peaceful, whose passion nature is calmed, who is sinless and of the nature of Brahman. 4:27. He who beareth no ill will to any being, friendly and compassionate, without attachment and egoism, balanced in pleasure and pain, and forgiving, ever content, harmonious, with the self-controlled, resolute, with manners and buddhi dedicated to me, he, my devotee, is dear to me. 12:13-14. If we turn to the Buddha, we find him with his arhats, to whom his secret teachings were given, while published we have. The wise man through earnestness, virtue, and purity makes himself an island which no flood can submerge. Yudnavaga 4:5. The wise man in this world holds fast to faith and wisdom. These are his greatest treasures. He cast aside all other riches. X9. He who bears ill will to those who bear ill will can never become pure, but he who feels no ill will pacifies those who hate, as hatred brings misery to mankind. The sage knows no hatred. 13:12. Overcome anger by not being angered, overcome evil by good, overcome avarice by liberality, overcome falsehoods by truth. 20:18. The Zoroastrian is taught to praise Ahura Mazda, and then, what is fairest, what is pure, what immortal, what brilliant, all that is good. The good spirit we honor, the good kingdom we honor, and the good law, and the good wisdom. Yasna 37. May there come to this dwelling contentment, blessing, guilelessness, and wisdom of the pure. Yasna, Lix. Purity is the best good. Happiness is to him, namely, to the best pure and purity. Ashamv. All good thoughts, words, and works are done with knowledge. All evil thoughts, words, and works are not due,